The night Adrienne opened that velvet box in front of 200 people, she did not cry. That was the part no one expected. The room had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears, where you can hear champagne bubbles rising in glasses across the room. The grand ballroom of the Ash Grove Hotel in downtown Chicago was lit the way money insists on being lit, warm, golden, deliberate. White orchids lined every table. A string quartet had been playing something soft near the far windows. And there stood Adrienne Calloway, 36-year-old wife of Garrett Calloway, holding an open jewelry box, while her husband watched her with an expression she would later describe to her attorney as the face of someone who believed they had already won. Inside the box was a bracelet. Not just any bracelet. A Selene bracelet, the Lumière Éternelle cuff from the Spring Collection Platinum set, estimated retail somewhere north of $40,000. Garrett had announced it to the room before she even opened the lid. "Nothing but the best for my wife," he'd said, lifting his glass, drawing applause from his father's friends, his college fraternity brothers, the business partners who had flown in from Atlanta and Dallas. His father, Warren Calloway, 68, had stood at his son's elbow, beaming like a man who had taught the boy everything he knew. Adrienne looked at the bracelet for a long moment. Then she looked at Garrett. "Before I put this on," she said, her voice carrying just far enough, "I'd like to have it authenticated." The applause hadn't fully died. A few people laughed, assuming it was a joke. Garrett laughed too, the tight, controlled kind. "Adrienne, I'm serious," she said. "I'd like Marcus Holt to take a look at it." Marcus Holt was standing 20 feet away. He was a gemologist. He was also, though most people in that room didn't know it, one of Adrienne's oldest friends from graduate school, and she had personally invited him that evening, which Garrett had assumed was a social courtesy. It was not a social courtesy. To understand what happened in that ballroom, you have to understand what the 12 years before it looked like. Adrienne Calloway, née Adrienne Voss Park, had grown up in a small house in Evanston, Illinois. The daughter of a Korean-American accountant and a French-Haitian nurse who worked double shifts and still found time to read to her every night until she was old enough to be embarrassed by it. She was not beautiful in the way that stopped rooms. She was pretty in the quieter, more durable way, the kind that people noticed 10 minutes into a conversation rather than 10 seconds after walking through a door. She had her mother's cheekbones and her father's precision. She had a gift for numbers that her high school math teacher had called unsettling in a complimentary way. She earned her MBA from Northwestern at 26. By 28, she had co-founded a materials sourcing consultancy called Lenara Group with 2 colleagues from her cohort. By 31, Lenara Group had contracts with 4 Fortune 500 companies and a client list that required a non-disclosure agreement before she could discuss it. She kept a small office in River North. She kept a low profile. She did not attend the conferences where people wore their net worth on their lapels. She did not post on LinkedIn. She did not appear in any of the Chicago business press under her married name because she had taken careful steps to ensure that her professional identity remained attached to Voss Park, not Calloway. Garrett did not know this when he married her. He knew she was smart. He knew she worked in consulting. He knew she was not the kind of woman who needed to be impressed with dinner reservations. She always seemed faintly amused by the restaurants he chose, which he interpreted as sophistication, and she never corrected. He was 34 then, working in commercial real estate development, good-looking in the way that photographs well and ages into authority. He was Warren Calloway's only son, which meant he moved through Chicago with a particular confidence, not earned exactly, but inherited and worn comfortably. He was charming when he needed to be. He was careless when he believed he wasn't being watched. The problem with Garrett was that he was very good at calculating who was watching. He never calculated Adrienne correctly. The first signs were small. They always are. He cancelled plans with the kind of last-minute ease that suggested the plans had never really been plans to him. He checked his phone during dinners with a particular private expression. Not guilty, exactly, but sealed, like a room with the lock turned from inside. He spoke about Adrienne to his friends in ways she would only learn about later, through the offhand comments of their wives. "Garrett says you're in consulting? He makes it sound very mysterious," said with a small smile that meant, "He makes it sound like nothing." She didn't confront it immediately. This is the part the comments on videos like this always get wrong. They ask why she waited, why she tolerated it, as though patience is the same thing as passivity. Adrienne was not passive, she was methodical. She had built a company from a spreadsheet and 2 maxed-out credit cards. She did not make moves until she understood the full geometry of a situation. She was waiting because she was watching, because she wanted to be certain before she acted, and because the cost of acting too early, losing a marriage that might still be salvageable, felt higher for a long time than the cost of waiting. Then she found the credit card statement. Not through snooping. It arrived in the mail, a paper statement from a card she hadn't known existed, addressed to Garrett at their shared address, and it slid out from a catalogue she was pulling from the mailbox and landed on the front step face up. She picked it up. She read it. She stood very still on the front step for approximately 40 seconds. Then she walked inside, set it on the kitchen counter, made herself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table and read every line. The charges were not ambiguous. Hotel stays in River North on nights Garrett had told her he was in Cincinnati, a jeweler on Oak Street, not the transaction itself but the name, which she recognized as a boutique that sold custom pieces. Dinner for two at a restaurant she had mentioned wanting to try, which Garrett had said he couldn't get reservations for. He had gotten the reservation, he had taken someone else. She put the statement in the small fireproof safe in her home office, behind the hanging files, where she kept her own financial documents. Then she called a private investigator named Dominic Farr, whose name she had been given 6 months earlier by a colleague who worked in corporate litigation and who she had hoped she would never need to use. She was thorough about it. She always was. Dominic Farr delivered his report 8 weeks later. Adrienne read it in her car, parked in the garage beneath her office building, because she had learned through experience that the best place to receive difficult information was somewhere private, and also somewhere she would have to eventually leave. It prevented her from sitting with it too long. The report was 43 pages. There were photographs, there were receipts, there was documentation of 7 trips, 11 restaurant visits, and a weekend in New Orleans that Garrett had told her was a client conference. Her name was Sienna. She was 29, a marketing associate at a firm in the West Loop. She was not the first. Dominic's report indicated delicately that there had been at least one other situation in the past 2 years, which had apparently concluded before Sienna began. Adrienne sat in her car for 11 minutes. Then she went upstairs to her office and worked until 8 in the evening, because there was a client deliverable due, and the deliverable did not care about her personal life, and she had always respected deadlines. That night she called her attorney, Nora Felton, and her best friend from college, a woman named Sloane who lived in Minneapolis and had never liked Garrett and had said so, carefully, once 3 years into the marriage. Adrienne had not wanted to hear it then. She heard it now. "What do you want to do?" Sloane asked. Adrienne thought about it. "I want to be patient for a little longer," she said. "There's something I want to finish first." The bracelet had been Garrett's idea, but the party was Warren Calloway's. Warren had suggested, in the way that Warren suggested things, with the tone of someone's announcing, rather than proposing, that the family host an anniversary gala for Garrett and Adrienne's 12th year. It was not a milestone anniversary in any traditional sense, but Warren liked occasions, and he liked the Ashgrove Ballroom, and he liked the way an event of that size let him move through a room receiving gratitude. What Warren also liked, and had liked for the past 4 years without knowing the irony of it, was Solène. Solène was a luxury goods house. Jewelry, accessories, a small leather goods line that had launched out of Chicago 7 years ago and become quietly one of the most coveted independent brands in the American luxury market. Warren collected their pieces. He had given Solène cufflinks to 3 of his business associates as gifts that year alone. He spoke about Solène at dinners, with the authority of a man who considered himself a connoisseur. He had no idea that Adrienne Voss Park was one of its founding investors and its current silent majority owner. This was not something Adrienne had hidden from Garrett out of strategy, at least not at first. In the early years of their marriage, before the cancelled dinners and the sealed expressions and the credit card that appeared on the front step, she had simply been protective of her professional life in the way that women who have built things from nothing sometimes are. She had seen what happened when a woman's accomplishments became an extension of her husband's identity. She had watched it happen to 2 of her colleagues. She had decided early that Lenara Group was hers and Solène was hers, and that she would share those things when she chose to, and not because she was expected to. Garrett knew she had some investments. He did not know the scale. He did not know the specifics. He had never asked with enough genuine curiosity to receive a complete answer, and she had never offered one. Warren had once said at a family dinner that whoever was running Solène had extraordinary taste and should be invited to one of his club events. Adrienne had agreed that they had very good taste. Then she'd excused herself to refill her water glass. So when Garrett told her 3 weeks before the anniversary gala that he had purchased a Solène Lumière Éternelle cuff as her gift, presenting it as evidence of devotion, of knowing her, of choosing something remarkable, she had looked at him for a long moment. "That's a beautiful choice," she said. She called Marcus Holt that same evening. Marcus was thorough and meticulous, which was why Adrienne had trusted him since 2009, when they'd studied in the same research library at Northwestern, and he'd once returned a pencil she'd left on a table by tracking down her email address through the department directory. He examined the bracelet within 12 hours of her request. His conclusion was delivered in a single text message, characteristically efficient. It's a replica, well-made but not authentic. The platinum is plated silver. The stones are lab-grown zirconia, not the diamonds in the original. Whoever sold it to him either didn't know what they were selling or knew exactly what they were selling. Adrienne forwarded the message to Nora Felton, then she forwarded it to no one else. She said nothing to Garrett. She smiled when he mentioned the party. She helped Warren's assistant finalize the guest list. She wore the bracelet, the fake one, the replica of something she partially owned, on the night of the gala, on her left wrist, where it caught the light exactly as the real thing would have. She let the evening proceed. She let Warren hold court near the bar, telling his associates about his latest Selene acquisition, showing off the ring on his right hand. She stood nearby and listened and did not correct him, and watched his face as he spoke, and thought about patience, and about how long it takes for a room to understand what it's actually looking at. She waited until Garrett made his toast. He was good at toasts. She had always granted him that. He was charming, fluent, capable of making a room feel included without actually including them in anything real. He spoke about their 12 years. He said something about partnership. He held up his glass and said something she didn't register because she was watching his father's face while he said it. Warren, glowing, satisfied, the patriarch presiding over a moment he believed he had curated. Then Garrett reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced the velvet box, and opened it, and the room exhaled with appreciation, and Adrienne looked down at the bracelet she was already wearing, and then looked back at him. She held up her wrist. "I already have it on," she said mildly. The room laughed. Garrett laughed. He leaned over and kissed her cheek and murmured something about wanting her to have it again, officially, in front of everyone. Adrienne nodded. She took the box. She looked at the bracelet inside it for a long moment. Then she said, clearly enough for the nearest 4 tables to hear, "Before I put this on, I'd like to have it authenticated." The silence had a texture to it. Garrett's expression shifted through 3 phases in approximately 2 seconds: confusion, amusement, warning. "Adrienne, it's a party, Marcus," she said, raising her voice just slightly, not unkindly. Marcus Holt appeared from the direction of table 11. He was holding a small loop, a jeweler's loop, the kind that folds into a leather case smaller than a wallet, and an authentication card that he'd prepared in advance. He was an unassuming man, 61, with reading glasses on a cord around his neck, and he moved through the room with the unhurried confidence of someone who had testified in court 23 times and found the experience restful. He took the box from Adrienne. He examined the bracelet. He made a small notation on his card. "This is a replica," he said, in the same tone he might use to confirm an address. "The setting is silver plate, not platinum. The stones are cubic zirconia. It is not a Selene original piece." Warren Calloway set down his glass. Garrett said, "That's not possible. I purchased it from a dealer." "Do you have documentation?" Marcus asked. Garrett did not have documentation. He had a receipt which Nora Felton would later subpoena and which would establish, among other things, that the dealer had explicitly sold it as an authentic piece for a price that was 30% below retail, a discount large enough to suggest that Garrett had known or had chosen not to ask the questions that would have told him exactly what he was buying. The room was very quiet. Adrienne took the box back from Marcus and held it gently. She looked at Garrett with an expression that she had practiced in her bathroom mirror for approximately 4 days. Not cruel, not triumphant, but composed in the specific way of someone who has already made all of their decisions and is simply watching other people arrive at theirs. "I want to tell everyone something," she said, "because I think it's relevant." She turned slightly toward Warren, who was standing with his chest beginning to cave in the way of men who are understanding something slowly and don't like it. "Selene was founded 7 years ago by 3 partners. I was one of them. I am currently the majority owner. The Lumiere Eternelle collection, the one on Warren's right hand, the one on the cufflinks he gave to 3 of his partners last spring, the one Garrett just presented as my anniversary gift, is mine, or rather it's ours. The company's." She paused. "What he gave me tonight is a copy of something I own." The room did not move. She looked at Garrett. "I also know about Sienna," she said quietly, but in a quiet that carried. "I know about the trips, the card. New Orleans. I know about the one before her too. I believe her name was Petra, but Dominic's report wasn't entirely certain about the last name." Garrett's face had gone the color of old chalk. "I had a very talented private investigator," Adrienne continued, and a very good attorney, and a great deal of patience. And tonight, I'm done being patient. She had walked through the logistics with Nora weeks in advance. The paperwork was already filed, had been filed for 6 days, quietly, through the Lake County Courthouse, where neither Warren nor any of his associates had connections that would surface a flag. The dissolution was a matter of public record by the time Garrett's attorney called the following morning. In the days that followed, several things happened, in the order they were always going to happen. Garrett's attempt to locate community property was met with the careful architecture of Adrienne's finances. Lenara Group held separately, Solène held separately, the house titled in a trust she had established 4 years before that predated the marriage dissolution criteria. He received what the prenuptial agreement, signed in 2013, specified, not more. Warren Calloway did not attend the mediation sessions. He was seen twice, at Solène's Oak Street boutique, and on the second visit the store manager, who had been briefed, offered him a receipt for his existing pieces and politely suggested he might prefer to shop elsewhere in the future. Sienna, for her part, had not known Garrett was married in the first place. This was established to Adrienne's satisfaction through information Dominic had gathered, and it was the one piece of the whole picture that had allowed her to feel something other than anger. She had no interest in Sienna. That was Garrett's debt to carry, not Sienna's. Her friends in the weeks after kept waiting for her to fall apart. She didn't. She was busy. Lenara Group had a contract renewal in April. Solène was preparing a fall collection, and she had creative approval on 2 of the pieces. She had a lot of work, and the work required her, and she had always found it easier to move forward when there was something in front of her worth moving toward. Sloane came to Chicago in early March and stayed for a long weekend. They ate dinner at the restaurant Garrett had taken Sienna to, which Adrienne had chosen deliberately because she believed in reclaiming rooms. The food was good. She could see why he'd liked it. "Are you okay?" Sloane asked on the last night. Adrienne thought about it in the way she thought about everything, actually fully, without performing the answer. "I think I've been okay for a while," she said. "I just didn't want to admit it until I had all the information." There is a particular kind of person who mistakes a woman's silence for permission. They mistake her patience for weakness. They mistake her restraint for ignorance. They assume that because she has not yet said anything, she does not know anything, and they make their plans and their excuses and their purchases accordingly. And they stand in ballrooms holding velvet boxes and believe that the performance has been entirely successful. They don't account for the woman who has been watching the whole time. Adrienne Vos Park, she returned to the name in April, formally, was not a woman who had been wronged into strength. She had always been strong. The marriage had simply been a period in which she had chosen not to show the full extent of it, and its ending was not her fall. It was the room finally seeing what had been standing there all along. She kept the fake bracelet. She put it in her desk drawer at the Lenara Group office, in the River North building, on the 14th floor, where on clear days you could see the lake. It reminded her, she told Sloane, that the most dangerous kind of fraud is the kind that looks exactly like the real thing, and that the difference only becomes visible to someone who knows what they're looking at. She knew what she was looking at. She always had.